Good morning. Good Thursday morning. I'm Susan Haney, and I'm welcoming you here again to the Presbyterian Church of Lowell, where I'm going to talk about a woman from the Old Testament. Actually, today I have selected two women that I'd like to talk about. The first one is Keturah. Keturah is found in Genesis chapter 25, and she is listed as the wife of Abraham. This is in the course of the story. This is after Isaac and Rebekah have married, and Abraham in his old age takes a new wife. She has 6 sons, and each of those sons is the beginning of a new nation. If you remember, God had told Abraham that he would be the father of nations. The only name that I recognize in that listing of sons in chapter 25 of Genesis is Midian. And the Midianites figure in the biblical record regularly. What I find interesting is that although in verse 1 of chapter 25, Keturah is listed as Abraham's wife, if you read on down to verse 6, the Bible says that Abraham gave everything he had to Isaac, but his other sons, by his concubines, he gave gifts to them while he was still living. Isaac was the heir. He was the one, and he was the son of promise that God had given to Abraham and to Sarah. And apparently, as the first and chief wife, the other wives were considered more concubines than they were actual wives. Weird. Whatever. That's what the Bible says. You can go back and check it and make sure that I haven't lied to you. The second woman that I'd like to talk to you about is named Abishag, or Abishag. I'm not real sure which way. Probably the would be more accurate for the Hebrew. We find her story in 1 Kings chapter 1. The Bible says that at that time, David had become a very old man, and he was no longer able to keep himself warm. No matter how many clothes they put on him or how many blankets they put on him, he could not get warm. If you've had much interaction with the elderly, you know that it's not uncommon as we advance in age that our heaters kind of go out and we do have trouble staying warm. So David's advisors hit upon a new idea. And they said, well, why don't we get a beautiful young woman to come and serve David? And that's what they did. Her name was Abishag. She was a Shunammite. She came from Shunem. I'm not sure where that is. You can probably look that up on Google if you're really interested in it. But she was young and she was beautiful. And she served King David until he died. She took care of him, she looked after him, she fed him, she talked to him, and indeed, she kept him warm when he was cold. The Bible is clear to say that their relationship was never consummated, and I don't believe that she's ever considered or mentioned as his wife, but she was his companion. I think it's interesting that two of the great leaders of the Old Testament determined in later life that having another human being, another companion, was a good thing. I think that's true of all of us, that we need people around us. We need a companion. And our elderly folks who are widowed, sometimes our not so elderly folks who are widowed, need companionship. They crave the human touch. And that's what I see in the stories of these two women, is that they provided an invaluable service to these two elderly men who needed companionship. They needed somebody to talk to, somebody to hold a hand, somebody to give a touch. And that's something that we all need. I applaud those of you who are left widowed and remarry and find someone else who can care for your needs. But I also would admonish every one of us who knows an elderly person who's in that situation to reach out to provide the ministry of presence, to provide the human touch, to listen to the stories that these folks tell. We all have an opportunity to serve the elderly in our communities, in our families, and in our churches. And I hope that as you go through the next week that you will think about the legacy of Keturah and Abishag, and that they did indeed provide a great service to the elderly of their time. I hope you have a great weekend. Stay cool out there, and I'll see you next week with another story of a woman from the Old Testament. Bye-bye.